Okay, I know I might be a little biased, but I think this short film or episode or whatever absolutely rules. It's the Astartes 2 we were always promised. Let's go. This is awesome. I don't care what the critics say over at IGN or whoever wants to put it down as a whole. The 40k episode is so beast, and I am definitely not biased. Okay, I know I might be a little biased, and no, there isn't a Space Marine helmet right behind me. Secret Level is a brand new animation by the makers of Love, Death and Robots that is kind of like 15-20 minute episodes all based on a different video game, and one of them, episode 5, is based on Space Marine 2 or a continuation of Space Marine 2, kind of like a mini episode, mini mission post game. So if you're watching this episode, you're happy to be spoiled about this episode, but also the main plots of Space Marine 1 and Space Marine 2. Now, I just want to say that the CGI in this, the animations in this episode are really, really good. They're very crisp, they're very clear, and they don't look too janky. It looks very, very natural. And what's interesting is it's like a mostly silent film. There is dialogue, don't get me wrong, but just like not a lot. A lot of the show conveys its story and its plot via body language and atmosphere. And I'm going to be talking about a lot about atmosphere today. It has a very similar feeling to Astartes, which is a free fan film that came out a couple of years ago that Games Workshop actually bought and then made it exclusive to their website, so you can't find it unless it's a re-upload on YouTube now. But it's basically everything that people wanted when they first announced Warhammer Plus, which is obviously Games Workshop's own streaming service where they do, well, they were supposed to be doing animations, but now it's just like battle reports and painting videos, which is whatever. But today, basically, I've gone through the episode frame by frame to try and look and spot things that I think are interesting, like Easter eggs or things that I think that are happening or things that the story's trying to tell me, and hopefully share that with you and just kind of just like break everything down. It's a big analysis. I'm very excited for it. So by watching this, I'm going to assume you have a rough idea about the plot of the game, but very quickly, if you don't know, it's set 40,000 millennia in the future. That's why it's called 40k. And you have what's known as the Imperium of Man, which is the unified fighting force of humans and super genetic killing machines known as Space Marines. They don't really eat or sleep, and they're just they're just superhuman that also like regenerate really fast, and they don't know any fear, and they just like killing shit because that's what they believe is the right thing to do because they are indoctrinated from a very early age. It's a very cool story. But basically, think of them as super soldiers that mostly fight against like mindless aliens, kind of like Starship Troopers / Helldivers, but they also fight against traitorous brothers, and they fight against other races like orcs and super robots and loads of stuff. But the basis is, especially for Space Marine 2, mindless aliens, and then what's known as the Thousand Suns, which is like evil brothers that are made of magic, corruption, and dust and stuff. Told you, great story. But importantly, Thousand Suns worship a god known as Neech, and there's a thing called the Warp, which is kind of like an immaterium hellscape that doesn't really make sense, and it's controlled by evil chaos gods, and they can like bend reality and people's wills and corrupt their souls and body horror, all that. The Space Marines really do have the hardest job in the world. So with that out of the way, you've got a rough idea what's going on, so let's dissect this episode of Secret Level. It starts off with like a dramatic scene at night with blood on the floor, not much going on, with a voiceover, like a monologue referring to the process of taking everyday normal kids people and turn them into killing machines, as I said, by taking the kids and forcing them to break, in inverted commas, and molding them over decades and to get rid of like their weaknesses. And that's why they say, and they shall know no fear, because they've been traumatized throughout their entire life when they're young, and now they just like killing things and they regenerate really fast and they're super tall and epic and stuff. But essentially, rather than having weakness, they rely on the faith in the Emperor, which is the leader of the Imperium of Man, who is essentially made himself into a god as well. But he's kind of a god, not really a god, a demigod, very powerful, very epic, and currently dead on a chair, but that's all. We're getting really far in there. I'm trying to keep it surface level. But basically, they're led to believe that anything they do has the might of the Emperor behind them, and that's the right thing to do. Whether it is murdering planets, glassing planets, you know, the Emperor protects, and he also has a divine will that you, a Space Marine, are following. The camera then pans down to a small boy dragging what looks like a sword across the sodden ground, but it's not actually a sword. This is actually just a combat knife that the Space Marines use. This one from the chapter of the Ultramarines, which is the chapter that you play in the games. And I just want to call people out because I've seen a few videos that are breaking this episode down, and they're all like, yeah, he's dragging a chainsaw along, and it's not a chainsaw. Here's a small child, that is a knife. If he was carrying a chainsaw, one, he wouldn't be able to, and two, it'd be like 4 times as big as him. But this like knife is like super relevant to the rest of the show, so calling it a chainsaw is just wild. Anyway, the boy starts dragging the knife towards like a large statuesque figure, who we can only assume is the narrator up until this point. With the lights from the thunderclouds, you get like a flash of the statue. We catch a glimpse of a space marine looking down at the boy who's dragging the knife. And it's kind of like really showing the power dynamic between like normal human boy to big, massive, epic, cool space marine, because of just like how small he is and how he looks like a statue, but it's actually realistically a guy. A lot of the time, the space marines are referred to the angels of death. And even in the trailer for Space Marine 2, there's some guardsmen, which are just like normal humans fighting, and they refer to them as the angels. And this shot really encapsulates that ideology of kind of like normal human looking up to mini demigod, really cool angel of death guy. But the normal people look up to the Space Marines as saviors, you know. They're like, again, it's the god emperor of mankind has sent these guys to help us at this point. Even though if anything goes tits up, the emperor's will be to like glass a planet and kill everybody on it if things go wrong, or just kind of like, well, this planet isn't mega important, so we will just get rid of it rather than try to save it. But you know, the whole thing of 40k is like the ideology of the faith of one guy who is kind of dead but not really, he's on life support, and he is kind of with his mind bullets protecting everybody, so everyone kind of has to believe is the god emperor, because if they don't believe, his power fails and then things go tits up, basically. 40k has a lot of stuff going on, and I appreciate I'm trying to digest it for a video, but it is a really fascinating story overall. And when you kind of like look at like little scenes like this, we've looked at like 2 shots of this film and there's like so much to digest. It's really, really cool. And it shows the close-up of the boy's face, like strewn with blood and anger, just tearing down his face. And it's like, what? Whilst also saying, like, what could the soul like that be capable of? Referring to the fact that the monologue about taking, like, normal humans and turning them into living, breathing killing machines. What if he's already really angry? Just a really angry teenage boy who does not give 2 shits about anything. What would he be like if we broke him and turned him into a space marine as well? We then hear the boy talk. We get a line of, "Out of my way, old man." Showing that this kid is different. He doesn't know fear. He's literally looking at what everybody kind of like, not worships, but you know, if you see one, you kind of like, holy there's one of those here. And he's just like, get out of my way. I'm trying to, we don't really know what he's done at this point, but he's trying to do more of it. And he's pretty angry about it. So if he's doing that to a space marine now as a child, what would he be like if we made him super soldier and made him a killing machine? It'd be like super duper killing machine, Giga Chad almost. And the whole point is this kid doesn't know any fear now. And that's the whole slogan of Space Marines, they shall know no fear. It's what this episode is called. And that's why they're so good at defending humanity, because no matter what they're asked to do, they don't care. They just know they have to do it. They don't see things being tore up in front of them and be like, oh my god. They're kind of like, okay, well, that thing needs to die. Bang, bang, bang. We're then shown a space marine waking up, or like, because he's kind of been like having a flashback or a memory. You could presume that memory is his, and he was monologuing about the boy. Is it either like reminiscing about what happened, or just kind of like considering his actions? Like maybe he took in this boy and turned him into a space marine. What happened to him? What could go wrong? What went well? What went bad? Kind of like either reminiscing or kind of like reconsidering his choices in the past. We then zoom in on a screen, kind of like a mission screen at this point. It's all very goth. It's all very 40k. Obviously, they live in the 41st millennium, but they don't bother putting lights on. They're just gonna have candles everywhere, which is, you know, a vibe. It's an atmosphere. But we see the screen with the next mission objectives of destroying an apostate relic, otherwise known as a relic of someone who's turned their back on the Imperium. You know, very evil relic. We don't like that because it's kind of like indoctrination of believing in the Emperor as one god. They don't really like anyone believing anything else either, because that's how evil gods are born, basically. Long story short, think good thoughts get good gods, think bad thoughts get bad gods. Then the second part of the mission is like securing the ordnance strike coordinates, because they obviously want to go like... So their job is destroy the relic and pinpoint where they're going to shoot the bombs. But we can see this is on planet Zatu, maybe, I don't know how to pronounce it, and we can see it's tithe grade, which is basically like in the Imperium they have like a ranking system on planets of like how important planets are to the Imperium. Do they pay loads of taxes? Do they have loads of oil? You know, can we take the oil without them caring? You know. We see this ranking. It has an Astartes of C151, clarifying that his world is ranked C151, starting from like A1 being the best, down to A1000, then B1, then B1000. This one being in C. It's pretty decent. It's not crazy. We'll try and save it, but if it affects a planet B or higher, we're kind of like, It then shows us who's been allocated this mission as a strike squad. We have Mataris, who's the Blade Guard Sergeant, then Icaron, another Blade Guard, and then it cuts and zooms to show Titus will be with them. Obviously, our main protagonist, we played in both Space Marine 1 and Space Marine 2. This Marine then confirms the mission, which we can now presume is probably Mataris, the Sergeant of the Blade Guard squad, which are essentially like not honor guard, but they're like the elite. They're very elite in terms of like their ranking of Space Marines. They're like very well trusted, you know, and they've been around a bit. And we can presume it's him who's been having the monologue because of his voice matches, obviously. And if we look ahead just a little bit, the boy he's referring to at the start of the monologue during this flashback, it's safe to presume this is Titus at this point. Hence, like, the close-up of the eyes when he sees that Titus has been allocated to this squad. And this mission is essentially a suicide mission. So he's kind of, like, looking, like, remorseful, maybe. Is he, like, regretting having Titus on the squad? Does he not like that? Or is he worried because he brought Titus into this life of being a Space Marine after seeing how cool and epic he was as a little kid, and now he's essentially being sent on a suicide mission with him, which is also super funny, actually, considering that this is set exactly after Space Marine 2, the plot, you know, after the game ends. This is the next mission that Titus is sent on, and again, big spoilers. When Lord Calgar, the chapter master, the leader of the Ultramarines, kind of says like, "Yo, Titus, really sorry for sending you to the Death Watch. That was a big F up on my part. But we do have this really important mission for you." And your mate Leandros, who rides you out to the Inquisition, got you put into the Death Watch, has been skeptical about you ever since. He's got a special mission for you where you're gonna go die. Kind of ironic that Leandros still he's trying to get Titus killed, or at least sent away. Or is it more likely that he's seen how resistant Titus is to chaos and he's kind of like built different Giga Chad at this point, so recommended him for the task? I'll leave that one up to you. I just thought it was funny. Yeah. Sorry about that, but your mate who hates you has sent you on a suicide mission next. Cheers, lad. Anyway, once Mataris confirms the mission, we can see like a zoom out. We can see all the plugs to his black carapace on his back, which are like all these metal plugs. These are essentially used to connect his suit to his, like, one of his organs, which is kind of like a suit under his skin. And once it's connected to his power armor, it kind of becomes like a second skin. Rather than being a guy in an armor, it's going to feel way more natural. That's kind of like what the black carapace is and what all these plugs are. Speaking of, with another zoom out, we see Mataris looking up at a giant statue in this hall. This is a similar shot to kind of like what we had with the child, the boy Titus, and looking up to Mataris, a Space Marine. This statue is a Gulliman, the ultimate leader of the Ultramarines. I know. The hierarchy of Space Marines is kind of like God Emperor, guy on the throne, kind of dying and protecting everyone with his brain. And then you kind of have his sons, which are known as Primarchs, which is what Gulliman is, this giant statue. They're like, there's 20 of them, but just to keep it kind of clean, this one in particular is the leader of the Ultramarines. And then you have chapter masters, which is Calgar, and then you have captains and lieutenants, etc. Obviously, like where Titus was. So that's like the hierarchy, essentially. But as you see, he looks up. So this is a demigod to Space Marines, essentially, because he's the grandfather of everybody in that chapter, in his entire, everybody he knows in this army of war, his entire life spent with Space Marines. All he remembers is being a Space Marine and not knowing no fear. He's the big daddy, but there's one more big daddy, who's the Emperor, essentially. And at this point, Gulliman is the leader of the Imperium. He's not just leading Space Marine. So again, it's kind of like that hierarchy of getting that mirrored shot of child to Space Marine to leader of the Imperium. And then we see the servitors start bringing a helmet up. We can see it's a Blade Guard Sergeant helmet, which confirms that Mataris is the Blade Guard Sergeant on this mission. And you can see that this is known as an armoring hall. This is kind of like where Space Marines will kind of like meditate almost. It'd be like a meditative state between tasks. And this is where they're going to get loaded up and get all their armor on, ready to be sent out on a mission. It's actually really great animation by Games Workshop on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description where you can kind of see a Space Marine getting all armored up in this ritual, essentially, of attaching the suit to the black carapace and just getting them all ready for battle. It's quite good. It's quite short as well. So yeah, I recommend giving it a watch. Next up, we get an outer shot, a wide shot of the battle barge. This is the ship that you are on Space Marine 2 where you get sent out of your missions. Kind of like to clarify kind of like the scale of things. We don't really know where this has come from and we don't really see it move or anything, but we can just see it's absolutely giant. And then we see Mataris' squad moving through the halls of the battle barge, and Mataris slightly glances over at Titus, who we know and recognize as the main protagonist from Space Marine 2, who we play as, and he's obviously like, He's in the zone. He's locked the fuck in at this point. Just to confirm, we know that this mission is set after the main story of the game because he obviously puts his helmet on, and his helmet is slightly different for the video game. It now has the Laurels of Victory, which he was awarded when he defeated the Thousand Sun Sorcerer in the previous game. Because he's carrying like some sort of box, which it doesn't really explain what it is just yet. But he's dragging it along with Mataris' squad through like what I presume is like the bridge of the ship, or going towards the bridge of the ship, or at least going in towards the exit. And you get this really nice is a terrible word, this absolutely stunning shot of the Ultramarines company. We don't see what they're actually doing, but I feel like this is kind of like an exit ceremony, almost like a memorial ceremony. They're all kind of there to see them off on this suicide mission, which I think is really cool. You get to see loads of different Space Marine vehicles and stuff like that. You got some like Razorbacks, which are transports for the Space Marines, like armored tanks with guns on top. You got some Dreadnoughts, which we see in the game, and we of course see a couple of Thunderhawk gunships, which are used to transport Space Marines backwards and forwards. But yeah, just like the whole atmosphere of this hall, again, why use lights when you can have candles all along the pathway when you're on your little funeral, essentially, your funeral that you attend. And then the giant statues, obviously we see these on the tabletop all the time, but there's just these giant like dead warriors of old that are like being respected because they did something so cool, but they've got like a skull face. It's so beast. It's so beast. But because there is a suicide mission, they aren't sending a Thunderhawk, they're sending them down in what's known as a drop pod. I think you can work out what one of those does. But we get this shot of the drop pod coming out of the battle barge, and you can kind of see, even though we're like really zoomed into the battle barge, it's still like a piece of rice getting plopped out the bottom. So it kind of just gives you the scale of the ship that you don't really see. These battle barges are just like floating cities. They're huge. We then zoom in on the planet. We can see it's like a wasteland, and it shows us like a close-up of some eggs, like eggshells. And it doesn't really explain this point, but we know that the Thousand Suns worship the god of Tzeentch, which is one of the 4 main Chaos gods in 40k. And this one is represented with like bird-like features a lot of the time. So I presume it's just kind of like sowing the seeds. It's like, oh, eggs, birds, Tzeentch. I don't know. But considering like the next shot is kind of like some paper materializing from fire, it does just confirm that this planet does worship Tzeentch, and that's kind of like what they've been sent out for. And obviously it perfectly ties up with the fact that Thousand Suns, which are also Space Marines, but really evil. Long story short, there was 20 Primarchs and 20 Space Marine Legions, as they were called then. 10 of them flipped sides, and they had a big brotherly love. You know, Thousand Suns being one of them. And they worship the god Tzeentch, so it's safe to say we've got some crossover, you know. But they're all magic, they're all like controlling reality, being all weird and stuff. And it kind of like perfectly captures that bird-like-esque thing, because the next shot is a cultist wearing a bird-like skull on as a helmet. I think I nailed it. The next bit of the episode, and again, it's been basically silent up until this point. The next bit of the episode is, there's no other way to describe it, of this next action scene, as just bolter porn, okay? And it's really good. If you have watched this point and you've gone, you know what, I might watch it, you kind of watch it for this, okay? We get a look through Mataris' hood. We can kind of see what Space Marines see in their hood. So we've got kind of like we've got 3 skulls in the top left corner, which I believe is representing the Blade Guard squad, because obviously it's 3 plus Titus. Then we've got the energy level for the power armor, which uses hydrogen for the air. That's why Space Marines wear giant backpacks. They're not little jetpacks or anything like that. They're basically dragging in loads of air and taking the hydrogen out, and that's like a power source to power the suit. That's kind of like how they keep going, and they don't really need like batteries or charging or anything like that. And as I said, the next action scene is just Warhammer 40k in a nutshell. There's no really other way to describe it. It's just really pretty, but also gruesome. We see the Chaos cultists gearing up, grabbing some weapons, getting ready to fight the Space Marine squad who are walking through the wasteland, with Titus being behind, following rear with this relic box thing that we see. And what I think is really cool is, as they're walking, it kind of has like this side shot of them walking along. And if you don't think about it, you just see this as rubble. But actually, if you pause and slow it down a little bit, I'll just like notice what it is. They're actually walking past an Ariok power claw of a Warlord Titan, which we're about to see a Warlord Titan anyway. But I just thought it was cool that you kind of like, unless you notice it, you don't realise that they're just walking past the Titan's claw that's just there. Which I thought was really cool. I didn't notice the first 2 times I watched it. It's actually the 3rd time I was like, holy shit, that's a Titan. Well, Titus is dragging this box on the chain and he's carrying it behind the Space Marine squad. We get a close-up of the box so we can see it's got an eye symbol on it, which is essentially the 3rd eye of the Emperor, his all-seeing eye, which you know this has some sort of like psychic nature. And then, as I said, we see Mataris look up and he spots a Warlord Titan just kind of like over this cavern that they're walking under. So that's obviously where the claw's from, but you know, I didn't spot it. I knew there was a Warlord Titan. I didn't spot the hand on the floor. And that's where we see the cultists finally catch up to the Space Marines and start shooting, and they just do not give 2 shits. As I said, this next action scene is just like a masterclass in bolter porn and gore. It's so expertly done, but the entire vibe is just perfect with the sound design because it's not really full on. It's very muted, which is really cool. This is what you want from Space Marine action. The thing is with it is, as I said, the CGI is so well done that it just looks right, if that makes sense. It doesn't look weird. It just looks very natural, and it looks how you would expect, which is, again, what they're trying to achieve. I'm just saying they haven't missed the mark. It's really good. We then see cultists rock up with what looks like a looted tank, probably a Lehman Russ of some sort, which is a tank the Imperium of Man would have in their normal army. Obviously, it's been taken by evil dudes. And then we just see Titus just absolutely leg it. Which Mataris isn't happy about, to be honest. He obviously looks back at the box that he's just left, but he just legs it, and just another car comes out and he just runs through it. Oh, it's just beautiful. It's so good. Anyway, they destroy the tank, they melt a bomb it, but Mataris, importantly, hands the chain back to Titus. Whilst in this instance, Titus outranks Mataris. I think there's like a little sign of respect there because obviously Mataris is his elder. He's kind of like probably his ex-mentor. So there's a little bit of like father-son energy, you know, even though he outranks him now, because obviously Titus is a lieutenant and Mataris is the sergeant of a squad. I just thought that was really cool, like a little nod, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, crack up, here kid, come on, focus. But as I said, there's no dialogue. There's only dialogue at the beginning of the episode with the monologue, and then like right at the end. All of the story is told via body language and like these sorts of like exchanges, which I think is just like really cool. I think it's really good, really well done. I don't think Space Marine should be talking too much because they don't give 2 fucks about anything, quite literally. But next up we see some black gloop rising off the floor. This is kind of to allude that something's evil happening. And then we see Purity Seals and Mataris and all the Space Marines start burning up. Obviously magic, evil magic, warp reality stuff is about to happen. But these are kind of like the oaths that the Space Marines take, and they stick them to their armor, being like, I will not fall to chaos, and they're all getting burnt up. So it's very symbolic. But we see Mataris have like a weird vision of young Titus, but gloopy this time. And we see the real Titus look over at Mataris and kind of like spot that something's not quite right. He just, again, Giga Chad just knows. They jump down this big hole, which obviously as they're getting closer to it, there's more gloop. They jump down it, and the gravity eventually changes 90 degrees, because obviously they're sliding down the hole, then they're just stood up. We're dealing with the gods each, and I know there's a lot to take in, but essentially they can just warp reality and change it however they like. They can do what they want. That's kind of like their whole thing. They can corrupt people's souls. We'll see more of this soon, but it's kind of like just kind of shows you that they're just in a different plane now. Oaths are being burnt up, unless it's evil, and there's gloop that's rising from the floor, which is probably evil. They're kind of laying it on thick a little, but you know. The whole point of Tzeentch is they try and like mess with you, they try and mess with your psyche, they get into your mind and stuff like that. And we can kind of see that already. We're seeing like weird flashbacks or weird visions from Mataris, and then they decided to jump down this weird hole as well. And then it shows like the fighting scene from one of the trailers, which is really cool. I was surprised this was actually left in, because I thought this was just an advertisement for Prime because of the blue blood, but it's actually in the episode, and it's really cool. It's just fighting odd demon things. These are what's known as Zangors. They're kind of like human demon mixers that have kind of like, they worship chaos, but they weren't super sick, so they kind of just got a really crap thing. But they can see they're like got like bird-like features, and they chop up really well. And this scene is just Baharoth blue. And then after that, they drag the box on and they move on to what looks like some sort of library. Again, kind of like Tzeentch's whole thing is like knowledge and fate and time and all this stuff. But you can really see it's like the realm of Tzeentch. This is like perfectly captures it. You've got like the library, you've got like the floating crystals and stuff. And also the nice thing in inverted commas about Tzeentch is kind of like, because they mess with reality all the time, because they're all knowing and whatever, you kind of got like a really juxtaposition of like 3 random places all stuck together, but it still works, you know, which I presume is kind of like makes it easy during like storyboarding, as it could just be like, do you want to go here, here, and here? And then someone goes, how do you connect them? He'd be like, Tzeentch, and they just clap. They just clap. It's Tzeentch trickery, that's all. That none of the places are actually real. But again, like the atmosphere with the slow light turn on as they're walking down the giant hallway, the weird crystals, and then giant doors at the end. Oh, it's just beautiful. It is just beautiful, honestly. At the end of the hall is a gigantic room with a Lord of Change right in the middle. This is what we fight in Space Marine 2 as well, but this is essentially an avatar of the god Tzeentch. You know, these are these ultimate, highest ranking, the most evil, bestest demon of them for Tzeentch. And again, it's a giant bird, as we can see with the staff. And there's like multiple other statues around the hall. I believe these might be a horror, like a pink horror of some sort, but it never really shows, so I can't really tell. But I just hope if they are horrors, I hope there's 9 going around the room. It just never really shows. And this is where we find out what's in the box!
What's in the box?
Titus has been dragging this box all along, and he throws it open, and there's an Astartes in there. And these are kind of like psychic channelers. What they do is they sit and pray to the Emperor, and they wish for something, and that manifests into psychic energy, essentially. And Astartes are used as kind of like communication through the warp, which is the hellscape where all the demons like Tzeentch live. It's essentially hell, but epic. But they also use Astartes for, again, like this, because Space Marines aren't really telepathic. There are some that have psychic tendencies, but not many. So they use Astartes as like a psychic barrier at this point, so they can destroy what in fact may be the Chaos Relic, which is probably the giant Lord of Change thing in the middle of a giant room that's from a library through a hellscape that they don't know where they've been. It's probably that they've been sent to destroy. I don't think this is just like a random statue. I do personally believe that this is kind of like a petrified Lord of Change, maybe one that can't quite exist in reality yet. Kind of like how this Astartes is worshipping the Emperor to get this protective shield. Chaos guys kind of do the same thing to worship, to bring stuff from the warp into reality, such as demons, for example. Lots of sacrifices, etc. It's hard to know what's being said. Obviously, like, this guy's praying, it's like hard to understand the exact words he's using, or exactly who, because his voice kind of goes a bit demonic. But the general consensus is the Astartes is there to protect the Marines while they destroy the petrified Lord of Change. And the Lord of Change probably isn't happy about it, because as soon as he starts getting shot, weird evil ghost hands start appearing, and I think this is the Lord of Change, whilst being petrified, retaliating with magic, essentially, with psychic magic. Psychic magic is kind of all the same thing, but because of this barrier, he's not able to deal with them. So then we get a close-up of the staff that opens up kind of like a cocoon, and then something falls out of it. And this is a demon thing. A thing that's been in the staff, maybe a herald of Tzeentch, a demon sorcerer. Again, it's not really explained, but essentially this is an evil thing that is a magic guy as well, who's very evil and looks very cool. It's very Silent Hill-esque, I would say. But he's borrowed a few gifts from Tzeentch. He's obviously got some wings, and he's obviously probably pretty powerful, because the first thing he does is hit the floor and stop time. Again, Tzeentch bends reality. They kind of do whatever they want. And he's just like 100% body horror. He kind of like stops the bolter rounds hitting the petrified turkey in front of him, and then immediately like throws a knife straight through the Astartes, who's creating the psychic protective barrier over the Space Marines, since the barrier only really stops like magical psychic energy rather than like physical objects. Hence that's why they could shoot out of the shield, but the magic couldn't get in. But as soon as the Astartes dies, obviously it's just like, again, gore. The Marines also stop in time, because obviously that was the other thing that was protecting them. And you just get like some beautiful scenes of the time stop. Like we said, the Marine stopping is very cool. You get like a nice witness of them like stopping these big powerful machines, stopping time. But also the Astartes with the knife through him and the blood. Oh my god, is this just the Magic card, Magic the Gathering card, or what? So it's just like, oh, it's gorgeous, honestly. It's not really explained who the demon is, whether it's a demon or a sorcerer with gifts. You know, it's not really explained, but either way, he certainly makes an entrance. As I've been kind of saying, Tzeentch is one of the gods of the Chaos Pantheon in 40k. and is known as the Changer of Ways because he can kind of just like with anything he likes. They follow similar tropes of like nightmare horror, kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street, Silent Hill, and just kind of like messing with reality and your mind and your psyche and your soul and whatever. And we see that in full effect with him like kind of like closing his spine away and then just getting an extra pair of arms just for fun. And speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, this is like in full effect because he kind of like looks into the first Marine, the first Blade Guard's eyes. You see, he's kind of like sees into their soul, to which you see the Marine made of black gloop and then like tearing his own armor open and then holding the weedy body outside of the skin of the suit and then just like crushing his head, you know. And then we see back in the real world, not outside of the mind, is the Blade Guard blood just like erupts, like just like from his face and everywhere, and then he just falls to the floor. I think what they're trying to say is kind of like the sorcerer is revealing the greatest fear that whoever he's touching, how looking into has, and then using that against them and causing their soul to corrupt or fail, and then it's just like whatever they're scared of comes reality. Maybe this guy was scared of like not wearing his power armor in this sort of situation. That would be pretty scary. Tzeentch doesn't really like to kill in like a normal way. Obviously he did with the Astropath in this instance. The sorcerer did kill the Astropath with a knife, but that was kind of like needed because he couldn't use the fun magic stuff afterwards, because if the barrier's up he can't go and do fun magic. So he's kind of like there's a necessity kill with a knife or blade or whatever, and now I'm gonna have some fun, because they just want to kind of like feed or play with the psyche of whoever they're messing with. And then we see the second Marine go down, and then it's Mataris' turn. And this is where we get like a really good, gory, gross body horror close-up of the sorcerer's face, which is used to dive into the minds, and it's just so beast. Like the skin lifting with all the eyes and the obviously wet flesh, and then the middle eye opening with all the teeth. I'm saying it again. Cinema. Inside the psyche of Mataris, we hear him like repeating the same quote as the beginning of the episode of like,
I chose a child filled with pain.
And we see young Titus, made of gloop once again, still holding the combat knife, and then the sorcerer starts repeating the lines back at him, you know, kind of like gloop Titus starts like grows big, starts sprouting horns from his shoulders, and there's a lot to unpack here. So if you didn't play the original game, let me explain very quickly. So, in 2011, there was a game called Space Marine, where there's an invasion of a forge world known as Graia by the Orcs. 3 Space Marines, one of them being Captain Titus, and another being known as Leandros, are sent down to a planet to deal with the Orcs to protect the Titan, known as Invictus. An Inquisitor tells Titus to reclaim a power source to activate the Titan to defeat the Orcs, but it turns out the Inquisitor was actually dead, and he was actually being puppeteered by a Chaos Lord known as Nemeroth. The power source is not for the Titan, it's actually an evil warp object, which is used by Nemeroth to open a doorway from the material world to the warp, the immaterial world, to allow demons and stuff from their magic hellscape into reality. The power source corrupts anything it touches, so when Titus defeats Nemeroth, he snaps it with his bare hands. When he returns, his old mate Leandros, who's now the chaplain, has reported him to the Inquisition, the evil space police, who basically keep an eye on anyone who's going to be chaos or not chaos, and they kind of don't want anyone to be worshipping anyone evil. But they're convinced he should be corrupted because he went near the power source and touched it with his bare hands. But he essentially gets Jon Snow to the wall, but he said it's called the Death Watch, and that's why he's in black armor at the start of Space Marine 2, and he rejoins the Ultramarines once he's crossed the Rubicon Primaris, and Leandros is now the chapter's chaplain and sent Titus on this very mission. So, with all that, we see that Mataris' biggest fear is probably bringing a child into the Ultramarines, or more specifically, having that child, Titus, fall to chaos. Obviously, like, Titus wears a chain on his arm to represent the fact that he was part of the Death Watch, and maybe Mataris, like, when brought him in, felt guilty or pain when he realised that Titus had been sent to the Death Watch for potential corruption, and maybe he was worried about that, maybe worried about Titus actually falling to chaos after all. Or maybe he just had doubts after the events of Space Marine 1 and the events of Space Marine 2, Titus, again, not getting corrupted at all and just kind of like magically not being tainted whatsoever. Maybe he fears that he is actually tainted and he's lying about it, or, you know, there's kind of like a lot to like you can kind of look at, whether it's kind of like he was worried about him, was upset that it like Titus was taken by the Inquisition, or maybe he's still worried about the fact that he might be corrupted. But either way, this results in him getting stabbed by the very gloop knife, which we saw at the start of the show. I'm not really sure why he doesn't die at this point like the other Marines, because they kind of both fall to the floor kind of dead, especially the first one. Maybe the Tzeentch sorcerer can only manifest the injury that's happening in the mind, you know, rather than just being like, you get stabbed, that means you're dead. But he's severely injured, just not necessarily dead. But the other lads, F. And then finally we see the sorcerer enter Titus's mind. And with Titus, when we get the eye shot again, but Titus's eye doesn't dilate. Again, he's just not falling for this. He's not up for it. We see young Gloop Titus again with the blade, again with the combat knife, but this time the boy turns around. And we see a Gloop version of the sorcerer who's obviously like manifesting, doing all the magic-y stuff on this, who kind of like looks surprised, and he was like, wait a minute, what the why are you turning around? This isn't supposed to happen. As I think this kind of like represents like Titus's inner resolve, and again he's just built different. It's never truly explained why he's so resistant to chaos, and he's just, again, the Giga Chad. It's because he's got loads of faith. But like there's just like a couple of context clues, like such as the end of the game when Titus broke the thing that the sorcerer is using to bring the warp into reality in Space Marine 2. He obviously passes out, and there's a voice line that plays. Now, initially it was like noted as Calgar. When I first played it, it said Calgar said the line, but it's actually just like a voice now, and it says,
Rise, son of Gilliman.
I don't think this is Calgar. I personally think this might be a line from the Emperor, who's kind of like watching over him psychically, and it's just like a kind of like a divine intervention, and maybe that's why he can't be corrupted by chaos. It's just basically built different with a divine intervention as well. And it's a great way to kind of explain away plot porn, but he's got like super plot armor. Of course he can't be corrupted. We need him for Space Marine 3. So you see Gloop Titus turn around, run towards the sorcerer, grow and become full-size Titus before grabbing the staff and snap it in his hands. This guy really just loves taking Chaos-esque stuff and just smashing it, just like every time. This third time in a row. And then the demon sorcerer looks horrified. Obviously he's caught aback. It's like, how the hell is this guy, you know, just like controlling what I should be controlling, you know? He thought he had full control, but he's just realized he might have actually it. And then we get this beautiful close-up of the knife from the beginning, the knife that Titus has, the knife that is then used to jump and grab and slice the sorcerer in half, is the same knife, I'm pretty sure it's the same knife, from the beginning that Titus was carrying, the bunk boy Titus, which wasn't a chainsword. It was a knife. But again, literally cinema. Look at it. Look at the shot. Chops in half. Blood everywhere. Shakes the knife. The petrified Lord of Change. The bullets eventually go and hit it. And that falls down, crumbling. He stands unflinching. Oh my god. This is what Space Marines are about, baby. So good. So good. Anyway, we get another look at Mataris' HUD. We'd see his 2 squad members have died because the skulls have like gone to orange at the top left. And we can see the mission is complete and this Vox is re-established. But we can also see, if we zoom into the bottom corner, that his Lamaran's organ has failed. This is kind of like one of the 19 bio enhancements that Space Marine have. One of being the black carapace, which I mentioned earlier. But this one is essentially like kind of like allows blood to clot super fast, and the Space Marines gets like scars within like minutes rather than like weeks, which is kind of like why they're kind of like killer machines that just never go down. And then finally the Suzanne membrane in his pride. I presume it's known as Suzanne membrane. The Suzanne membrane is kind of like a fail-safe for Space Marines. Another one of the bio enhancements that they've had, where if they've suffered like extreme trauma, it can essentially like put the body into hibernation, like stops the heart running, stops the blood flowing, cleans any infection or anything like that, or taint or corruption in the body. And then when they get back to the battle barge or to wherever, the apothecaries, the doctors of the Space Marines, because obviously Space Marines have doctors, they like bring them, really like resuscitate them afterwards. So obviously you see that Mataris isn't quite dead. He's basically at this point. He's very much not in a good position, but it was a suicide mission after all. So Titus takes Mataris to safety, and we get some more shots of like some Chaos cultists headed towards the light from the destruction of the Lord of Change blowing up. So we got this like beam of light. As whilst the demon's dead, the followers are still on the planet, and we get this like lovely shot of them riding past like a crash battle barge, and then each side of the cavern with all the lights and stuff. And again, there's another Warlord Titan. Another one there. They love hiding Warlord Titans in these things. I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be rare. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I'm pretty sure Warlord Titans are supposed to be rare in 40k, and I'm sure Titus has seen like 5 at this point. But that's definitely a new one, because his claw's still attached, so he's seen 2 in just this one place, very close together. Anyway, we then get another parallel to the beginning of the show. We've got the rainfall once again, and Titus looks over Mataris, and then Mataris kind of says like, job well done, mate. We are kind of, it was a suicide suicide mission after all, though. So, you know, we are getting Minecrafted here, you know? The entire planet's getting glassed. Don't worry about it. But Titus then kind of like smiles at him and kind of basically says, actually, old fogey, I'm not done yet. And it was, you see, like, the Chaos followers rolling over the hill. Titus, like, gets his helmet ready to go fight them. And again, this kind of, like, represents the respect Titus has for his old mentor. He's, like, gonna, like, try and protect him because it's pretty clear they've done a good job. They've done what they were sent to do. And they've got Vox communications back up. So the chances of them just kind of, like, glassing the planet while those two are still alive, probably very unlikely now. And then with one last look back, we see Mataris. He still sees the powerful child that he once took into the Space Marines and he took under his wing, and then the child runs into the battle, but it's actually Titus, but he's just seen him as a kid and seeing how badass he is, and oh my god, it's literally cinema, chat. Honestly. But that's it. That's the entire episode. I've talked about it a lot. It's just like, that is everything I spotted or everything I think about the episode. Again, I don't think they're about to glass the planet with Mataris and Titus still on there now, because they've got a Vox link secured and they want to settle for Space Marine 3. And I think it's kind of like a good way to kind of be like, this mission's really hard, you're probably going to die, but you are Titus, so plot armor. And it nicely leaves open for a third game, kind of like, rather than like how we had like a little cliffhanger at the end of Space Marine 2, we've kind of got like another little cliffhanger. Will it make it back to the ship? And also Secret Level has been renewed for a second season. So I think this episode in particular was quite highly rated. So maybe we'll see a second episode, like another mission that Titus goes on, just like a little animation like this one. Or maybe they'll go somewhere else. I'm not really sure. Maybe they won't even touch Space Marine 2. Maybe it's just like a load of other games. I don't know. If you watch this episode and were thinking in the back of your head like, whoa, this kind of reminds me of Astartes that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's for good reason, because Sayama Peterson, who was the fan who made the show, who then got essentially bought by Games Workshop, he's actually a storyboard artist or layout artist on this, and he's mentioned in the credits, which is really cool to see. And when you kind of go, yo, the guy who made Astartes was very involved in this, you see it everywhere, you know, how the Space Marines move, the back pummel from Mataris, like killing the Chaos Cultist. That's a classic Astartes trope now. So when I first watched it, I was kind of like, huh, that reminds me of Astartes. And then when I saw his name in the credits, I really wasn't surprised. Obviously, this is like a much higher budget than the fan film originally, but there's a reason he was bought by Games Workshop, or like taken in by Games Workshop. The reason they bought Astartes off him, his talent really shows along with the rest of the team on this. I just think, honestly, this show, or at least this episode, it's the only one I've actually seen, is just fantastic. It really captures the vibe of Space Marine, and I do think this is just like a cinematic masterpiece to say, if you ever want to see why I like Warhammer, just kind of watch this, and it is perfect in every scene. But the problem is, I think it's definitely kind of like a fan film, and by that I mean, I think it might be hard to fully appreciate or enjoy this without the extra context, especially like playing the game. Like playing the game is kind of like a bare minimum to understand what's going on, but with all that extra knowledge of Warhammer around it, really makes it a masterpiece. But without that, I think it might be lacking. Whilst I still think it's very good, don't get me wrong, don't flame me in the comments now, the extra context of the lore of Warhammer made me enjoy it a lot more, which I don't know if that will perfectly transfer to someone who kind of doesn't have any idea. Whilst it's not directly linked, I do think this kind of gives me some confidence with the Henry Cavill project with Amazon that was kind of like confirmed last week. Whilst it's obviously not going to be the same people, I don't think it's going to be CGI either. It does just fill me with confidence that with that sort of budget, they are aiming for the right thing. But that's it. I appreciate this is probably a long video now, and I know it's a little bit different to what I normally do, but with something as big as this, I felt like it was rude not to go through and have like with a toothpick and just like really have a good deep dive. And I really enjoyed it, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed it too. That's the reason it's delayed as well. It's just a lot longer than I was expecting it to be. There's a lot more to talk about than I realised. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Like the video if you haven't already, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more, because that's the only way that I know that you like this video. And especially to these people who are all members, who support the channel, they financially support me so I can do what I do. And I really appreciate if you consider clicking join down below. You can become members as little as £1.99, and you can become higher if you want extra rewards. So that's it. So thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the rest of Secret Level. I'm going to go watch the rest now. So thanks, and bye-bye. Bye.